Welcome to Jason Johnson's YouTube channel. This is Jason Johnson. Today is not a good day. And I say this all the time. A lot of times there's something really important to talk about. I've got my three things as usual, but today is a uncharacteristically not great day of news. So I'm going to try to go through my three things as per the usual. Like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate your enthusiasm, your comments, and everything else like that. A lot of people have been telling me, oh my gosh, I shared your videos one way or another. If you're seeing this, you know the routine. About the first minute's going to be on YouTube or Instagram or Blue Sky. I'm going to go through my three things, and then the full discussion is on my YouTube channel, Dr. Jason Johnson. Today it's personal, political, and sort of philosophical. So three things. First off, the DOJ, the Department of Justice under the Trump administration, has forced the president of the University of Virginia, Jim Ryan, to retire. I am a UVA alumni. This affects me personally. I'm going to talk a lot about that. Number two, the Supreme Court has basically gutted the opportunity for Americans to defend themselves down the road when the president comes after birthright citizenship. So I will be talking about that. And number three, Pablo Torre, one of the best journalists out there, as well as Mike Florio, has broken a very important story about how, surprise, surprise, which I've been talking about for a long time anyway, that there is massive collusion in the NFL that affects what you are spending your money on. So here we go. Let's start with the three things. So I'm saying this right here, right now. It's the middle of the day on Friday, June 27th, and this announcement just happened. So to get to the basic details, the Department of Justice, with some of their lead lawyers, a woman named HARMEET DILLON, key to understand this, who's in the Trump administration, and another guy named Greg Brown, who's both sides sued as a private citizen, whatever. They have basically led this charge to investigate the University of Virginia for supposedly not ending DEI programs fast enough. Okay, that's what this is all about, that the Department of Justice is going after universities for not attacking DEI aggressively enough. And the reason I mention HARMEET DILLON and Greg Brown is because they are both alumni of the University of Virginia. So these are people who are working with and in the Trump administration who decided they're going to go after their own college. Okay? And they have forced out the president, Jim Ryan, of the University of Virginia, who's been there since 2018, who was rechosen for the job unanimously in 2022, who has done an excellent job with the university, who has moved UVA. UVA was always a great institution, but it has been a number 2 or top 5 best deal for your money, best upward mobility for students for years. It is a public Ivy, up there with UCLA and Berkeley and the University of Michigan. UVA is always in that category. I'd also say Chapel Hill, where I got my PhD. That's your background. Here's why this matters, why I'm upset, why UVA people who've probably never seen this before are going to be watching here and now. I have been saying this for a long time, that last year when you saw Elise Stefanik and all these right-wing Republicans going after Harvard, going after Columbia, going after NYU under the guise that they weren't handling protests about Gaza, it was always a farce. It was a farce. It was a lie from the very beginning. None of these right-wing people cared about Gaza. None of them cared about any of these supposed issues that they were claiming about. What they were trying to do is set the pathway so that an incoming Trump administration could use whatever guideposts they want to go after universities. Why? Because universities are usually the proving ground where people who push back against authoritarian regimes come from. It's the faculty, it's the presidents, it's the students. That's where the resistance often comes from. Yeah, you got people in the streets, but a lot of times it's the universities. So why does that apply to this? Because the University of Virginia is not just a public school, but it is a public school in the South. And it is known to produce a large number of senators and lawyers and people who work in administrations. And so attacking that school in particular, since it's not as famous as Columbia, since it's not as famous as Harvard, since it's not as famous as NYU, attacking that school was always going to be the next thing on the Republicans' list. It was always going to be the next thing on this authoritarian regime's list, because they don't care about those elite institutions. And they know a lot of you don't either. They're like, we don't care what's happening to Harvard. We don't care what's happening to Stanford. But it was never about those schools. It was always about the public universities. It's always about the University of Akron, the Ohio States, the UT Austins. That's what they're going for. And if they can force universities to fire presidents, if they can force a President Ryan, who is universally popular, who has a school doing well, who has done all the great rankings, if they can force him to resign a year early so that Glenn Youngkin, the Republican conservative, who is the governor of Virginia, can put in any other person he wants in that position, if they can do that at the University of Virginia, they can do that definitely in Florida. You just saw it happen in Florida with FAMU, right? They pushed out leadership. I brought in this Marva Johnson person because she's going to be a Trumper. She's going to do what DeSantis wants. You know that's going to happen at the University of Georgia. You know that's going to happen under Abbott in Texas. These are all attacks on the university system. So regardless of whether or not it is your school, and I am personally upset because I went to the University of Virginia. And I don't just care about that school and happen to think that the president we had was a good president, but I saw this coming. And I keep telling people that when you give money to universities, when you go to local school board meetings, when you call your members of Congress, protecting your state schools is important. So that's the first thing. University of Virginia has been kneecapped, and the very likelihood is that Glenn Youngkin is going to put in some right-wing person because that's what this Trump administration wants to do. They're coming for your school next. And by the way, if you think they're going to stop at university presidents, you're wrong, because the next thing is going to be faculty. And they're going to start threatening to pull federal funds from universities that don't fire faculty that they don't like, because that's what authoritarian regimes do. Number two, the Supreme Court. Now, I'll say this up front about the Supreme Court. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I talk about this all the time. I always advise, when I tell people they're smart people to go after, obviously, Elie Mystal, who's like a good friend of mine, I always advise people read what Elie Mystal says in The Nation about the Supreme Court. But here's the basics, and here's why this is important. There's this idea called birthright citizenship, right? Which is the idea that you are an American citizen because you're born here, right? Birthright, born here, you're a U.S. citizen. It also applies if you're born in any American territory abroad, right? So if you were born on a military base in another country, that is still considered American territory. You are still an American citizen. Birthright citizenship is the cornerstone to how this country works. You're born here, you're supposed to have certain inalienable rights. It's what keeps the government from being able to treat you however they want. And this administration, since Trump was even running last time and the first time he was in office, has always been about trying to remove birthright citizenship. Because if someone doesn't have the basic rights of a citizen, you can do whatever you want. You can deport them to another country. You don't have to give them any rights. You don't have to give them a trial before a jury. That's what they've always cared about. If you don't have birthright citizenship, you have no rights. And the Supreme Court basically ruled today not to end birthright citizenship, but what they said is that if there is a case where, say, ICE goes and grabs somebody off the street, like you have the situation with the young man who was born on a military base in Germany and his father's Jamaican, and now they've deported this guy. So again, for all you ADOS people, all you people who say, I'm a foundational Black American, they won't care. We've been telling you for a long time they're going to take your rights away. Basically, what the Supreme Court ruled is that if ICE and the Trump administration grabs you off the street in Detroit and ships you to Guatemala or the Sudan or some other country, right, that you're not from, and you go to a local court, a local federal court, that court can't say, hey, not only was this deportation kidnapping wrong, but you have to stop all of these across the country until we review it. That's how our courts work now, that federal courts more or less have the opportunity to make rulings that apply to the whole country, because we're supposed to believe that our court laws are fairly equal throughout the country. And so if they're not, then that's a problem. And what the Trump administration didn't like is that, well, we want to have all the power in the hands of the Supreme Court because 6 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices are basically in the pocket of the far right, not just ideologically, but you got guys like Clarence Thomas who are getting paid off. You got guys like Gorsuch who are paid off. You got guys who are Kavanaugh who we know are paid off. These are not speculations. These are people who have serious financial conflicts of interest that have been investigated by ProPublica and the Senate and the House and everything else like that. It's just nobody does anything about it. So now the Supreme Court basically says no federal court can make an injunction when it comes to this issue. So in other words, if you get kidnapped by ICE and taken out of the country, you're going to have to get lawyers in every single district where this could potentially happen. You're basically going to have a class action lawsuit or wait for the Supreme Court to get involved. This is terrible news. Terrible news. Why? Because who has the power to run to 27 different federal courts in order to fight your individual case? 2, that can take years. 3, getting something in front of the Supreme Court is extremely difficult to do. So the likelihood that you've been taken out of the country and that you used to have to just go to one judge, now you might have to go to 20. And even then, you'd have to get rulings from all of them on their dockets. And even then, the Supreme Court would be able to get involved. So it's opened the pathway for this administration to continue to use ICE to pull people off the street and deny you your rights. Terrible news. Number 3, I'm going to say this. You guys know I talked about Shedeur Sanders. It's one of the most popular videos I've done. I talk about football. I'm a huge football fan, even though I know it's problematic. Pablo Torre, I advise that you go. Pablo Finds Out. It's a great YouTube. It's a great podcast. I listen to it. Big fan of Pablo Torre. Mike Florio. They talked about an investigation that they've done this week that has revealed, surprise, surprise, collusion on the part of the NFL. Oh, wow, really? That in 2022, and I talked about this. You remember when Shedeur Sanders fell all the way back in the draft and people are like, well, he was rude, he was irresponsible. I said, no, it's not. I said it was collusion. The NFL colludes all the time, right? The NFL colluded to keep Colin Kaepernick from getting a job. The guy was qualified. I'm not saying he was going to be another Super Bowl champion, but there are plenty more less qualified people than Colin Kaepernick, and he couldn't get a job anymore. And I also mentioned in 2022 how you had Lamar Jackson, who's a quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. At that point in 2022, he was a 2-time MVP under the age of 27. No other team offered him a job. None. Because the Baltimore Ravens wanted to keep him. And I said, that was collusion. You ain't going to have 31 other teams who say, I don't want this guy who's under 27 years old, who's a 2-time MVP. Right? Well, now we have documentation that Pablo Torre and Mike Florio and other investigators have brought out. They have shown that, yes, in 2022, the NFL Management Commission put together literally a PowerPoint presentation to tell other teams to not give guaranteed contracts to quarterbacks. Let's just make it clear. The NFL got together and encouraged other franchises in the league to not give contracts that are guaranteed to quarterbacks. Now, here's the key. The reason that they did this is because Deshaun Watson, who had just been given a guaranteed contract with the Cleveland Browns, got like a $250 million guaranteed contract. And they were like, no, we can't have this happen anymore. And you notice that the NFL gets together and tells all their franchises, don't give any guaranteed contracts anymore in a summer where you had Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Lamar Jackson all looking for new contracts. What do those 4 quarterbacks have in common? Oh, wait, I figured it out. They all play in the NFC. No, that's not what it is. They all play in the AFC. That's not what it is. Oh, they're all black. Oh, so a summer when 4 prominent Pro Bowl, 2 very likely Hall of Famers, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, on a summer where black quarterbacks were going to be exercising their power and asking for guaranteed contracts, the NFL literally has a meeting and a PowerPoint to encourage everyone else in the league to not pay full price for this talent. That's what we found out this week. So I'm going to tell you this. I've always said that the NFL is rigged. I've explained why the NFL is rigged. You can continue to watch it. I will probably be watching it this fall, but we can no longer pretend that this is anything other than wrestling. We can no longer pretend that people are being paid on their merit, paid on their talent. So you should never believe anybody else again who says, well, Shedeur Sanders, this happened because of that. This never has anything to do with attitude, never has anything to do with legality, never has anything to do with talent. It has to do with rich oligarch, 99% white people saying, I do not want to pay you for your talent. That's what it is. Always understand sports as a labor issue. And I'm going to talk about this more next week, but that's the key thing that we just found out. NFL is rigged. I told you this. Other smart journalists have told you this. Pablo Torre, Mike Florio have been talking about. So those are the 3 things. Number 1, the University of Virginia is just the next domino to fall. The Department of Justice is going to force out university presidents who will not bend the knee to this administration. It happens to be my alumni institution. I'm very, very sad about it, but it could be yours next. Call your schools, call your state representatives, tell them that you want people who will fight back. Number 2, the Supreme Court just came out and basically said, yeah, unless you have a class action lawsuit, we're going to let Donald Trump do whatever he wants and we're going to put things in our power. That is dangerous. That is problematic. Whether or not the Democrats can have a counter plan, I don't think so, because they don't seem to have much of a counter plan now. And number three, surprise, surprise, the NFL is rigged. And we have more blatant evidence of them not caring about your money, them not caring about the product they put on the field, as long as they're in control and they have power. That's been my 3 things for Jason Johnson today. Please like, subscribe, and share. This is going to be a lot of heavy topics going forward. Thanks, guys. Try and have a good weekend and not be too obsessed with the news.